My name is Susan Hayes. I am founder of Susan Hayes Enterprises. I have worked in the real estate design and construction industry for a generation. I look like I have a lot of pages in front of me, but it's really the font 24, so I don't have to wear my glasses. So don't panic when you see me turning pages. Okay, so today we're sort of moving the lens down the line a bit to talk about the vision that happens and how it is actually realized through the design and construction process. The panelists that are here today are, in some cases, considered to be industry veterans. I look at them more as special forces. Having worked with many of these women on design and construction projects over the last 25 plus years, you'll hear from them today what a day in the life of these women is, how it is to lead a vision, lead a team. And I think that hearing what they see in terms of the outlook for what the New York and US construction cycle looks like will be very, very helpful and insightful. So I know there's a bio for each of the speakers in your book, so I'm just gonna give a brief overview and introduction for each of our panelists. Earlier this month, the New York Building Congress came out with their construction outlook. And that construction outlook shows that we are in the 5th year of a building boom. The Building Congress charts almost $62 billion in spend in New York in 2018 and expects to see the same trend or better continue in 2019. So the question that I hope that we'll be able to answer today in the mind and experience of the panelists is, when will it end? What should we expect? So just a brief introduction. Sabrina Canner, I first met Sabrina Canner 20-some years ago when she was at Olympia in New York. And we had the privilege of sharing a mentor who was quite a character, a master builder by the name of John Norris. And so actually, it's fun to hear about mentors and how they've influenced your life. But he was extraordinarily impressed with Sabrina when she was at Olympia in New York. I had the privilege of working with her there, and as she has moved through our industry at Brookfield Properties, Sabrina is executive vice president at Brookfield Properties of Design and Construction, and she is responsible for the vision associated with some hallmark projects, including recently Manhattan West, the very, very well considered and received Brookfield Place, World Financial Center, to name a few. Linda Chiarelli, who's next on the panel, is the Vice President of Construction, Capital Projects, and Asset Management for NYU. She is responsible for key projects. Some of you may have noticed that gigantic hole down on Houston Street. And she's responsible for running assets all over the world for the university. Linda, prior to joining the university 2 years ago, spent 18 years at Forest City, where she was deputy director of construction, and she ran some amazing projects. Linda is a construction attorney and a civil engineer, which is an amazing way to look at the construction process. She handled projects including the Barclays Center, the New York Times headquarters, and many others. Linda worked with Mariana Cucumara. Mariana Mariana is currently the U.S. head of construction for Green Oak, which is a very active real estate investment vehicle. Prior to that, she worked 20 plus years at Forest City with Linda on many of the projects that we spoke about today. I heard Jen speak earlier about how you describe people who understand how to get a job done and are dedicated to their career as badass. I will borrow that term for Mariana. I will apply the same term to our last panel speaker today, Catherine Moss. Catherine Moss I've known for about a dozen years. Catherine Moss came for an interview with me personally 12 years ago, where she was willing to do anything to get into the construction industry and applied for a job as my executive assistant, which I, after spending an hour with her, turned her down for and found something much more appropriate in project management. I've watched Catherine's career just skyrocket, and we're very pleased to have her here today. She's a project executive for Hunter Roberts, where she's running currently a $100+ million project on the Upper East Side. These women sit at the head of their table in their respective industries. And today, what we've asked them to do is to share a day in the life. What is it like to lead a table that is responsible for articulating, deploying, delivering the developer's vision, the investor's vision in design and construction in one of the most complex cities to build in the world. So what I'd like to do is start by asking a general question to each of the panelists. And what I'd say is, can you provide a brief outlook as to how you think the industry is going to do in 2019, 2020? Sabrina, can I start with you?
Sure. No, not really. Oh, here, Mark. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You got it.
I'm on. In my ode to Pink Ghetto. I think I'll touch on multifamily, if that's all right. I would like to share that we are very bullish, continue to be very bullish on multifamily in 2019 and beyond for a couple of factors. The first is continued urbanization. 1950, less than 30% of our population lived in cities. By 2050, we project that almost 70% will live in cities, and we are somewhere in the middle of that rising continuum, and this, of course, contributes to the continued success of our multifamily market. Second factor is the rise of the millennials, and this group generally is an underfinanced, cash-strapped group. They all have college loans, not they all, but this demographic, in speaking in generalities, don't have a lot of money to put down on a home to purchase. Couple that together with rising costs of homes, and you further enhance the desirability of multifamily in our cities. In spite of the fact that we are currently outpacing our long-term delivery of units, we continue to see that demand outpaces supply on a regular basis. Feeling very good about that in the next few years.
Linda?
Okay. Is it on? Yes. All right. So I think from the university perspective, it's a little bit different. So in my role now, and there are a lot of universities in New York, our big push is on the life sciences, and it's complicated work. It's hard to fit into existing buildings. And we all in New York City have this really tight, limited footprint, despite all the claims of the two anchor ends of the universities taking over the city. There is a limit to the amount of real estate that we have, so I think it's continuing. We have a major initiative at NYU on life sciences, but I think it actually extends beyond the university setting with a lot of the co-location and entrepreneurship that's coming into the city.
Mariana?
All right, so I'm going to try to speak slow so everyone can understand my accent first. Okay, so, all right, design and construction for the next 2 years. I see the construction industry as a major engine for the economy, and as of right now, it's very active and will continue to be strong, in my opinion. We're going to see more of new buildings and new construction coming up. And I do believe in trends. I do believe in the 18-year cycle. We did have a recession in 2006. We went through the recovery phase. We were selling and renting vacancy, right, that was built in the past recession. And the demand and supply, right, changed the balance. And all of a sudden, we do see new construction, which evidently is bringing more jobs to construction people. And we see prices going up for material. Two things to follow here are the trades, right, and the negotiations that are happening now with China. 600 products are coming directly for China and will impact directly the construction of new residential houses and apartments. So we shall see how that will play into the future. But again, I do see this as a small fluctuation, but long run, I believe that the construction will be booming for another 5 to 6 years. So we're going to see growth through 2024. And this is based on the trend and something that I lived through. So I mean, you know, I'm not going to say it's a fact, but I do believe in it, and I think it's predictable. So the music will still be playing for construction people, and I see that. We also have at Greenock a big pipeline. I see the projects that are coming. You actually, Susan, you also have a software that you can see how many permits are out there, how many owners are looking to pull permits and start construction. So I do see, you know, good activity and for a few more years in this perspective. And one more point that I would like to touch on, immigration, right? There are some laws out there we hear about. I do believe that our construction force is aging, and I do believe that right now is the replenishing of that workforce is coming from immigrants, you know, from countries outside this country. And we talked about millennials. I don't think that, you know, any millennial will wake up this morning and say, well, I feel like hanging some drywall today. So I think it's going to be, you know, the point is we have to watch out for that. But the music will play, and we have to make sure as developers and contractors, not necessarily that, you know, when the music stops, we're not on the dancing floor, right? So there will be science indicators. We know how to look for those and be prepared.
Mariana, we hope you're right.
Oh, I hope so too. I'm hoping that, yes.
Catherine?
So 2019 is shaping up to be one of our best years yet. 2020 also looks very, very promising. But with that, I think that we're going to experience some labor shortage. We're already feeling it in the union market. And I think that, you know, with your labor shortages comes schedule impacts, and we have to be very cognizant of that and pre-plan for it. And I also think that for us, the tariff situation is something that we are closely monitoring, because we have to know when we're getting our material, and we have to plan for that as well. But I think that also, you know, not to be pessimistic, but to, you know, plan for if it does fall out a little bit sooner, to make sure that you're diversified in your markets, and maybe, you know, make sure that you are ready to builds things that perhaps are a little bit more counter-cyclical, like the healthcare industry and things of that nature.
Sounds like good advice. I think that one of the things that we found is that since we are in a cyclical industry, occasionally we will find ourselves short of talent because people are frightened at industries that are cyclical. And so I think that one of the things that we hope to talk about a little later today is to how to prepare for that and make sure that we can attract the talent to our business. Sabrina, in an industry that's highly competitive, you've worked in some transformative projects in the city. Can you take us through a recent day or case study that where you have resulted in a win for your team, and how you start out with a thought and end up with a design thesis?
Sure. So I'm going to take an example, a recent example, 1100 Avenue of the Americas. So my day starts, I get a call from Rick Clark and Ben Brown saying, Darcy Stakem has a really interesting opportunity, so let's tour. And sure enough, go to the site, and the old saying goes, the top 3 factors you should look at when you're choosing real estate is location, 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 and this opportunity checked all 3 boxes. So opposite Bryant Park, and stand there, and everyone who works or lives in New York City knows what a success story that is, Mr. Biederman's opus, and it's probably one of the best spots in the city. But as we're standing looking at this building, it occurs that on the north side of this building is our Grace Plaza. And the back side of this building has been covered up with stone, granite benches, beautiful granite benches, I will say, holly trees. It's all closed in, and it dawns on us that we have a chance to do something with this property that probably nobody else does. So as I'm walking around the building, I am unpeeling the retail all the way around to the plaza, and I'm seeing cafes behind where this wall was, and people spilling out into this plaza, reimagining the plaza, pushing the trees, the benches, so that we've got a more concentrated sense of community activity, and also noticing that the lobby is coming off of 6th Avenue, which probably made a lot of sense in the 80s. I don't know how many of you were around in the 80s, but Bryant Park had a fence around it to keep the trouble out. So I'm sure they preferred at that point to focus all their personnel, all their visitors on 6th Avenue rather than 42nd Street. Not the same today, so I'm looking at it thinking, oh, we're going to open the front door on 42nd Street, and we're going to continue through and create a visual connection from Bryant Park to the plaza. And it's a little low in there, so maybe I'm going to take out the slab, and we're going to make sure that I can see the plaza from the park, and I can see the park from the plaza, and now I'm getting really excited. So we go up into the building, and it's pretty true to its vintage, and you look out the window, and of course, stellar, beyond stellar views, but you're looking through this. So we've got mid-century era induction units that are up to here and a window pocket down to here. Start thinking, well, if we can invest in a new mechanical system and we can feed from the core overhead, I'm going to strip all this away, and we're going to have floor-to-ceiling glass. And we're going to make the most of those gorgeous, gorgeous views. And by the end of this, I've got everybody excited now. So we go back to the office and figure out how long is this going to take? What is this going to cost? And of course, there's always a balance. It's a double-edged sword, because while we have all these opportunities that someone else doesn't have, they're not figuring that into their offer price. So put all this into the pro forma sausage maker. It comes out, and here's the number we think we can offer. Back and forth, beat it up. Okay, here's the best offer. Here's the best number we can offer. Well, this was a really interesting deal too, because it wasn't a fee sale. This family had owned this piece of property since, Darcy, the 1800s, I think. It was farmland, and this was the cornerstone of their family's financial security. So they were actually offering the leasehold. It was a long-term ground lease. So lucky for us, it wasn't only about price, it was also about value creation, and value creation moving forward, and ensuring and contributing to that family's financial security. So we did have our day with the owner, cut to the chase, back and forth. I wasn't all in one day, sorry, but I'm making the story work. And we prevailed. So we, together with our partners in the Grace Building, actually succeeded in being awarded this opportunity. So as anyone who's been in that position knows, you have the, oh my God, moment where now I have to make this work. I have to do it for this price, get it done on this time, go through these processes, and we have to make money. So at that point, we sit down, we marshal our best ideas and put together an RFP, series of RFPs for an architect, landscape architect, engineers, and our design team. At that point, we send this out, and I keep going. Send this out, we bring everyone in, and we look at the balance of experience, great ideas. We're managing risk at this point. We need experience. We need great ideas, but we also need experience, especially with the renovations. Someone has to understand what is it that we have to go investigate in order to understand what we don't understand, to protect that number. So go in, send out all our RFPs, and our responses come back. We go through our interview process, and we make our selection and assemble our design team.
And if we could all figure out in advance on the contracting side how to budget those things from this conversation, we'd be way ahead of the game. Anyway, thank you, Sabrina, that was very helpful and insightful. And so, Linda, can you talk a little bit about, okay, so now you have worked on some of the most challenging sites and projects, financial structures. I'd be interested to know if you think as a lawyer or an engineer first, it's sort of like which language do you think in? But what is your day like now that you have the team? Can you give us some insight into how you spend your time?
Sure. So this was actually a really great question to be asked, because I would imagine for most of us in the room, you go to work, you do your job, and you don't sort of stop to think about what it takes to get from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Forget about the project, right? So you've heard the really broad-reaching vision from Sabrina, and now you'll answer that question, which hat comes first when I think, because I'm going to drill down to a 2-hour meeting that happened this week to sort of give an idea of what it's like to be at a table in a project meeting. This is a project related to NYU's biggest project right now, which is a $1.2 billion project. And we are spending a lot of time talking about steel and steel erection. So we're in a room with the design team. The design team means that we've got multiple architects. We have the mechanical engineer, the structural engineer, the geotech engineer, a whole cadre of other specialists in the room. We have the construction manager, we have the steel contractor. So there are probably 25 or 30 people in the room, and you're managing this dance when you're sitting there. And what's the issue? The issue is shop drawing approval is not going fast enough. What's the problem, right? Is it that there was a problem with the design drawings? Is the fabricator coming in and making changes? Does anyone care? Well, yes, we start to care because we find connection sizes are changing. It's impacting the architecture. Now it's flowing through to the mechanicals, right? The pick weights are changing because now we have splice plates where we didn't have them before. We have a crane scheduled to come in, and we're challenged with the weight, the capacity of that crane, right? All of these things are happening at the same time. And you're hurting these cats. You're pulling out facts from them. You're trying to build a consensus in the room, but everyone, to some extent, has their corner. And so one of the things that I think I try to bring into the room is, in every meeting, we are just looking forward. We'll figure about looking back afterwards. We'll all be there. But if we can't move forward, the looking back only gets worse. And you have to know that at some point in time, I mean, it's a big decision. You bring a crane in and you're spending $80,000 a week for that crane to be sitting there. If your first tier of steel is ready and you put it up, that's great. And then all of a sudden, because the shop drawings didn't catch up, tier 2 of steel isn't ready, that crane's just sitting there. And think about that. We have 3 cranes sitting there at basically $80,000 a week for each of them. And a very active community who's sitting down looking at the holes saying, oh, you've stopped work. Did you run out of money? Did this, that? You know, everyone has their ideas of what's going on. And ultimately, that room of people are turning around and looking at the person at the table and saying, okay, what do we do? And so you have to be ready to make a decision. And I think, you know, the worst decision is no decision, always. You want to make a well-reasoned decision, but you cannot let the fear of making a decision stop you from forging onward. So from the very broad to the very, very detailed. And that was 2 hours of one day. When we met ahead of time, just following up a little bit on what was said at the last panel, I had just come out of a bunch of bid interviews for mechanical contractors. And so, of course, NYU has a very robust MWBE process, you know, and goals that we have. So we're meeting with one of the plumbing contractors, and I said, you know, tell us about your MWBE. Will you be able to hit our goals? And his answer was, I have a girl who works in procurement for me. And then he said, and there's one in accounting too. So, you know, that's not even answering my question, which is how many owned businesses are you bringing in? So you see the extremes. You see the people who haven't, plumbers seem to be the worst at this. They haven't sort of caught up. And then you have some people that are very engaged and coming to the table knowing what year it is. So.
Hear, hear. Okay. Mariana, you're in a very different role now as the U.S. head of construction working for Green Oak versus working for a developer, sort of more accountable with a second chair, but knowing your style, your perspective as an engineer, and your track record. What is your day like? How do you manage your operating partners? How do you manage the expectations? How do you manage the table?
So thank you for the question first, and thank you that I'm the third one, so I got a refresher from Sabrina and Linda, and also a refresher from the investors, right? So that was good. So yes, I have experience. My past experience was in development and construction, and now I'm in a different world, real estate investment. And my role had changed in a certain way, but there are similarities with my past life. And that's why I said I'm glad that I've been refreshed on it, because I did do the move about a year and a half ago. So my role now is, first of all, to make sure that we are making disciplined investments, and we are executing on the business plan for profits. So that's very important. I also know that there are two components of an investment. One is the construction cost and the schedule. And that's something that I have to deal with most of my time. And that's for the projects that are already in execution. And then I get to be creative and have walkthroughs for new acquisitions, and walk the building up, up and down, and go into the switchgear room and check on the cooling tower and the chiller, and how old is that, and what kind of air conditioning system is here, and how can we make it better, how can we bring value to a building. And I'm actually very proud of my company, because we are looking at unloved, undermanaged, and old buildings, and we're trying to make them better. And we are staying within a footprint, right? So we're not cutting trees. So we're trying to go in and revitalize urban cores, and that's good. And also we're trying to be energy efficient, implement all the sustainability materials and measurements. So now a day of my life could start with attending investment committee meeting, in which we're going to present to the investors a possibility of a deal, and we have our cases, and I work with the acquisition team in putting together the capital improvement projects, talk about budgets, and also helping them in making realistic assumptions, which I believe, in my opinion, that's the key to success. When you make a realistic assumption and you stick to it, and that's, and you can take a Class A building or a Class B building and make the best of it, but invest and increase the value that can bring you a return. I think that's important. So I could do that for like 2-3 hours a day, being in such, investment committee meeting, and then someone else will take it further. Or I could go on a site and review a project that is already in construction. And I want to say also, yesterday was a very good day for us. We finally obtained the certificate of occupancy to a project that we developed in Los Angeles. We opened, the TCO was obtained in February, but it took a while to get the final inspections and get the certificate of occupancy. And this is a hotel. I would like to say that was the first investment by women in the United States. Was built in 1926, and Green Oak, with our operating partner, bought it in 2015, closed it down, and did a full gut renovation. And this hotel that was built by women was for women, so for women travelers. So for a couple of 30-40 years, it was just for women, and then I think late 70s, the current of let them in, started by men, and then they got into the hotel. So now, of course, caters for everyone, all genders. But that was interesting,
Well,
and I wanted
congratulations.
to touch
That's
on that.
fantastic.
Yes. So, but again, and I do still have the responsibilities in the second chair, in which I go to construction sites. I do have here in the room one project manager that is working for our operating partner, and she can tell us that I'm doing construction review, negotiating with contractors, talking to subcontractors. Another part of my job that I really like now, I get to pick colors. So you get to pick colors, what
Good.
color.
We'll make sure that there's some pink in there.
Yes, Yes, yeah. Oh, but I want to say something also about my day, because to what Wendy said earlier, and that's important because it happened to me a few days ago, and we had a big meeting. I was the only woman at the table. There were about 30 men at the table, and we were negotiating a big claim, and at the end, I did all the negotiation, and in the end I said, okay, so what's the next step? Are you going to call me? And he turned to my business partner, Rob, and he said, Rob, I'm going to call you on Monday. And Rob said, what are you talking to me? She's the boss. Nevertheless, so, you know, perspective, right? And how we are still
It's still a
in
work
this
in
world
progress.
that is changing. It gets better, but there is room for improvement.
Thank you, Mariana. So Catherine, you are sort of at the end of the line here in that you are the conduit between everything that your fellow panel members have discussed today and getting it built. Being in the construction industry and representing the interests of your business and representing the interests of your client, and making sure they're one and the same while you manage a workforce of a few hundred people and several contractors. So give us a day in the life.
Okay. So, you know, as the contractor, I think that my main goal in life is to bring like a vision that Sabrina was talking about. I want to bring that, you know, I want to show her that it's complete. I want to hand her the keys. I want everybody to be happy. So,
On budget and on schedule.
on budget and on schedule, of course. No, we want everybody to be happy at the end of the day. So in getting there, I will give you a Tuesday. So I will start quite early. My first meeting of the day is a cost meeting, and that's with the client, and we go through all of the change orders that are on the books at that moment. Where, you know, we start with the ones that are critical to the schedule. We walk through them. We talk about funding sources. We talk about anticipated costs that are coming up, and then we go into an overall client architect meeting. And in those meetings, the point is to drive home critical decisions. What are the most critical things that are outstanding right now that we need to decide right here, right now in the room? And one of my job description, I guess, is to make sure that the client truly understands the technicalities of what is happening on site. I need to translate it all so that they really understand it and they can make an informed decision about whatever that issue is at the moment. So that's a lot. That's a lot of the meeting, is to go through the critical items. We want to make sure that we're on pace with procurement, and if we're not, why? What is holding it up? Get to the root cause of what's going on. I think it all goes to how you communicate and how you truly understand, you know, what is the client asking for? What is their vision? And what is the end user's requirements also? So if you can really understand that as the builder, you'll take that and you'll go back to your 40 trade subcontractors, and you will you make sure that they understand it, and then you're going to capture it in their contract. So, you know, I might go from that meeting and then go into a subcontractor buy meeting where I am going to make sure that they understand not only all of our experiences we're going to capture in that contract, you know, any of my resources and their experiences. I want to make sure that that all gets into the contract, because then I'm protecting Hunter Roberts, and then I'm protecting my client, and the subcontractor understands what we expect of them. So it's a very open, transparent, you know, communicated process for a buy meeting. You know, we get into a lot of the technicalities of coordination when you're awarding a trade subcontractor, like Linda was talking about with steel. I mean, we were awarding an architectural precast facade, and it's important to understand, you know, that there's a cutout on the first floor for a fire service. It is not on the drawings because I have ongoing MEP coordination, and I know that it just moved last night. But I now need it cut out in an architectural precast panel. So I need to make sure that I capture that in the buy, because I want that cut in the plant, because I want a perfect cut. That's what the client's going to want. You know, and then I need to go back and make sure I get a credit from the aluminum panel guy, because he doesn't have to do that cutout anymore. So there's a million things like that go on at any meeting, where you just have to be really on top of it and capture that in the subcontractor's contracts. And then, you know, after that, I might have an internal meeting, and I think it's very important to check in with your staff and the people that are running your job. You know, they're extremely important. Their happiness is extremely important. You want to make sure that they're okay, go through their critical items, and then help prioritize them according to, you know, where the job is globally. You want to make sure that everybody's working towards the same end.
So we are in the construction industry in particular is a very early business. It's not uncommon to start your day at 7 a.m. That's when construction industry people come to work. So I wanted to ask you all if you could tell me sort of your work-life balance in an industry that is demanding high pressure and has that type of time commitment. And Sabrina, can I start with you?
Sure. And I'm going to quote a good friend in the industry here, Greg Kelly, who's CEO of WSP. Yeah, sorry, I don't think this was pointed to me. How's that?
Better here.
Yeah. I'm going to quote a friend in the industry, Greg Kelly, CEO of WSP, who believes, and I share that belief, that balance is a myth. It is. There are days when work needs you and you're 24 hours and completely absorbed. And there are times when your personal life calls and those needs come first and you've got to make that call. In the end, I don't think we're actually looking at balance, we're looking at harmony. And if you can make everything harmonize, if you can get to the point where you are covering all your bases and getting it done at work, and home understands and home is cool with that and maybe even cheering for you, that's a win. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. If you're delivering on a regular basis and bringing in your projects on time, on budget, creating value for your company, making yourself indispensable, when things are maybe going south in your personal life or whatever it is that pulls you from your workplace, they'll understand and they'll support you. So every day we're faced with those tough choices and would just say it's most important to make the choice and then make it work. And that would be my advice.
Thank you, Sabrina. Linda?
Sure. Well, life's complicated, right? And it starts, I think, when you're very young and we make time for what we want to do. And I think that that's really how it works. I love that the industry starts early because no one else is looking for me at that time, so I can get a couple of free hours of work in, right? That's really exciting for me. But when I got out of engineering school and started working, I wanted to go to law school. I found a way to fit in night school, and I did it. You fit it in. When I wanted to have a family, you fit that in. It's a scale in a way. It's not really balanced because it's always tipping, but if you sort of find your neutral, it's a good and happy place, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. Forest City was a great place. I think I've counted 8 women on today's panel that have ties and worked at one point in time with Forest City, so that helps. You need the right environment. You find the time. I can say that, and with a straight face, I can still say that for 30 years, I have not been able to find the time to go to the gym, but that's okay.
Thank you, Linda. Mariana?
Yeah, well, I don't want to repeat what Sabrina and Linda said because I totally agree with that, but I just want to add to what they said. And I want to say that, we need a life outside the office too, so I think that's important. Work is important, but life outside the office is important. So, and we are also trying to make a career, and sometimes you have to prioritize. And you prioritize in the moment. It's important to work late tonight because there is a big project, you work late tonight. If it's important to take off tomorrow to go to your child's school violin concert, then you take that day, and it's okay to take time off. I mean, I think that's what I want to communicate, that, because, you know, I manage people. I also worked and I was managed by other people, and I also always had the idea that, oh, I have to be present, I have to be at work. And I worked for Linda, right, at one point, and you know, my daughter was having her prom, and she told me, so you're going to take off tomorrow? I'm like, well, that's a good idea, actually, but I haven't thought about it. But it's good when when your manager tells you that, because yes, you want to be, you know, have job security. You want to show everyone that you're good at what you're doing and you need it, right? But family is also important, relationships outside the family, and don't try to be perfect. You can't. I also want to make one small point here. I do have a child. I have a daughter. She's an adult now, 25 years old. And one time we were driving. We were in a car driving someplace, and then she said something to the extent that I never been the mom on the bus when she was growing up. And I said, Mama, what is that, mom on the bus? She said, Mom, you know, sometimes we were going on school trips, and some mothers volunteer and they came along, and you didn't. You never came to that. And then I asked her the question. I said, so then if you're gonna grade me on a scale 1 to 10 as a mother, like what grade do you think I should be? And Hanser said, she said, Mom, that's not fair, because you weren't a 10, but you were a 10 at doing your best. You try your best. And I think that's important. If you try your best, everyone understands, your spouse, your partner, your life partner, whoever, everyone can understand that, you know, work gets in the way. And also I want to say that working long hours all the time does affect the relationship, does affect home. So balance, right? Balance for meet, for I forgot what you said, Sabrina. Harmony. Yes, harmony. Very good. Yes.
Thank you, Mariana. Catherine?
So so recently, I guess, I came from, I re-entered the commercial construction industry in New York City. Prior to that, I'd been out on Eastern Long Island doing residential construction. So I made the choice to come back into commercial world, which wasn't as simple decision as you might think. I have a family on Eastern Long Island. I have a husband that's anchored in Montauk, which is about as east as you can get, and 2 small children under the age of 4. So making that decision scared the shit out of me. Sorry to curse. But it did. It really, really did. And I can tell you that it taught me the most, that if something does scare you, it's probably a good idea. You jump into it, because I knew that, you know, if I was fulfilled in my career and if I was challenged on a daily basis, I'd be a better mother, a better wife, just happier for my entire family. And that has absolutely proven true. So I think it's very important to always follow your gut. You will figure it out. I mean, the moral of the story is if you can figure out how to build a building, you can absolutely figure out how to balance it all too.
Kat, that's terrific. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'd like to, if I could, open up the floor for questions. I think we have a brief moment for a question or two. If anyone would like to ask a question, you might want to go to where the mics are. Any questions for our panelists today?
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for taking time to come here and share your experience. It's been really exciting to hear all the knowledge you've gained and the stories you have to share. So my question is twofold, and it really just relates to the recent innovations in technology, especially pertaining to construction and various innovations in construction, such as modular, et cetera. Do you see any of these recent developments being ones that are really going to stick around and impact the construction industry in New York? And also, do you see them as perhaps a solution to labor shortages or more affordable housing?
Linda, you want to take that one?
Sure. So it's been slow. It's been like 40 years slow. And I don't see it speeding up really fast. I think there's it's a complicated sort of equation, because you do have a labor shortage, you have an aging labor market for sure in New York. But you don't really have the people coming in behind that can embrace the technology. And it requires major investments. And it requires builders, owners, developers who are willing to take a risk. And that's not always in their DNA, not a risk that big. And we've seen some really complicated projects. Susan was right in the middle of one of them. So the end is not always all roses. So if you don't have people who are willing to invest, so I feel it's got to be baby steps a little bit so that you can see the benefit of a technology and then allow it to grow a little more organically.
Linda, thank you. I'm sorry that we've run out of time, but I want to thank our speakers. You did a fantastic job. It's very helpful and insightful.